Hey, Michelle. Okay, so I am going to spend maybe not the next 45 minutes, probably shorter than that, but to talk about a lot of the admin dashboard work that has gone into I2B2 1.8.3. So this is actually going to be super exciting. So exciting. Okay, these are probably the two most important slides that I have that kind of set up the stage here. Um, as many of you are probably aware, in a common I2B2 setup, you have various databases that hold user information. Of course, your data, and then the ontology and so forth. So here, I just wanted to draw out that this is the project management cell. It has a bunch of users or Ps. So, and then typically a site a site has a I2P2 project, right, that you assign all of these users in, right? So let's say that there's 500 people in your 500 investigators in your I2B2. You typically would have a production I2B2 project that you would, when people start registering in, you would add them to the project, right, as usual. And this project is connected to, your CRC database, so you would see like your data warehouse, and connected to the ontology database, so that you would see, Michelle's ontologies, and then so forth. And this I2B2 project, right, the most important thing is that it holds all the previous queries. So all of those 500 investigators that run queries are in this project. So as if you have the manager role, you'd be able to see all the queries that the investigator has run, right? And this also applies to data exports. So as kind of you heard in the morning, all of the kind of data export requests are also held in this I2B2 project. So this is the kind of the typical setup that an institution has for their I2B2, right? So I kind of want to just show how I2B2 could be used a little bit differently, and how using multiple I2B2 projects, and maybe some sites right now, some of you guys are actually using this methodology. But you'll see how if you use this kind of multiple I2B2 project setup, it kind of synergizes extremely well with all of the admin changes that have gone into 1.8.3. So this is the same project management database, holds all of the users. There they are. But but I made these slides like in the middle of the night. But basically, instead of one big production project, right, where you have 500 or you have like 1,000 users in that project, right? Imagine if you create a project just for one PI, right? So if Michelle Morris is a PI and she has her own team, that's what this blue signifies. For example, it's like Michelle's one of those. No, this is blueberries. Yeah, like, and then she has two other people in her project, right? So this project only contains three people. Furthermore, there's a Mendes project, right? So Mike, let's say Mike Mendes is an investigator. You could create an I2B2 project just for Mike. Mike is the PI. He's set as the manager role, and then he has, let's say three study staff with him. So this project only has 4 users. And finally, a Jeff Clan project, funding is tight, so there's only 2 people in this project. But the common thing is that all of these projects point to the same database, right? The data never changes, the ontology doesn't change, right? This is the same exact thing. Basically, the configuration for all these projects are the same exact thing, right? It's just pointing to the same data sources. But the only thing different is that each one of these projects can now maintain their own set of previous queries, right? So as a PI, for example, or for Michelle, if she's set as the manager, you would only see all of the activity, all of the previous queries that were done under Michelle's project, right? And the same thing goes for Mike, and the same thing goes for Jeff. So what this kind of paradigm sets up is that different studies at your same institution, right, by different investigators, you would basically be able to set, the PI as the manager role, and you'd be able to only see the queries that are operating in that project. And that also applies to data exports. So that means that, the way that the 1.8.3 data exports are working is that, there has to be a kind of a data request manager. Somebody has to process it. So imagine there's not a central data manager processor, it's Michelle, right? So someone makes a data request, Michelle or the PI can process those data requests. So this is kind of simplified model, but in a institution that may have like 500 PIs, right? We're proposing here that there could be a setup where you have 500 I2B2 projects, right? You don't have 500 databases, you don't have different, ontologies. They're all pointing to the same thing. So this kind of segues extremely well into, because there's kind of a new activity and usage monitoring dashboard that is being introduced in 1.8.3. So I think the first line here, admin tool, I think everyone's familiar with it if you've used I2B2, is like the admin tool is a way for you to manage users, user parameters, projects, project parameters, and so forth. But there is now this new activity usage and monitoring tool in which it allows you to do several things. It allows an admin to look at the overall, and we're only talking about one I2B2 instance here. So the overall kind of status of your I2B2 by looking like what's the total number of users in my I2B2. How many, what are the new users in the last 30 days? What are the number of successful or failed logins that, that have been against the I2B2, the web client, for example? What are the current number of active sessions, right? So this is important for when you want to do maintenance. You want to reboot your I2B2 server, but you can actually now see that there's 6 people logged into your I2B2 instance. So all of this data, all of this data exists in I2B2 already in 1.8.2 and 1.8.1. This is now just providing a way to finally access it in a UI and see, these parameters and see this data in real time. And furthermore, you can now inspect, not just the I2B2 instance, but you can now inspect specific I2B2 projects, right? So now imagine if you wanted to see what's the activity in the PI's project, right? For example, like the Michelle Morris project. So what's the total number of users in that project? What are the new users in the past X number of days? How many queries were run just in that investigator's project, and so forth. Continuing, and the last thing is that kind of very technical, but if you know that there exists in I2B2 in the CRC a table called Qt query master, right? And this is basically the one kind of main table where all I2B2 queries get written into. So now there's a way to inspect all of the data that goes into this Qt query master table. So you can finally see in an I2B2 instance queries that were performed, let's say by query name, by user ID, the duration of the queries, right? How long queries have been taking, the status of the queries. So did they complete or did they fail? And then patient counts. So again, we're actually adding nothing new in terms of writing to the database, because this is all data that exists today. A lot of people probably inspect that table already to see what's going on. And this is kind of really easy to tell what's going on in an I2B2 when you kind of want to see, like, if someone reports my I2B2 is slow, I2B2 is not working, you can go into this table, look at the last 20 queries and see, wow, some of the queries, the durations are taking longer, or the status of the last 20 queries just say failed across the board. So you know something is up with your I2B2. So I think there's a bunch of screenshots here, but I think maybe the more important thing is I kind of want to go into a demo right away. So I think I can show some of this live. So let me try to do that. Something. Nope. Okay. Perfect. Hey, do you see? So, okay. So here I'm just logging in as just pretend that I'm like an admin at of an I2B2 instance, and I was just logging in. You can now go to tools, and now in addition to the admin and configuration tool that everyone is aware of, there's now this new activity and usage monitoring plugin in 1.8.3. Let me try to expand on this. How does it? Great. Okay, so the first screen that you see is like overview, and what this means is that um, these boxes show exactly the number of users across this I2B2 across all of the projects in this I2B2 instance. So for example, there's 40 projects in this I2B2 instance that have 67 users, including 24 admins. That's a lot of admins, but typically you wouldn't see that many admins. But here you can see, okay, 23 new users were added in the last, then X number of days. You can kind of just see, 30, 60, 90 days, for example. And then here you can see in the last week, there's been 153 login attempts in this I2B2, right? In the 150 are successful, 3 are failed. So failed could mean a lot of things like bad password, expired password, and so forth. But this kind of just gives you the lay of the land of kind of what's happening in your I2B2. But if you go into a specific project, so pretend this was a PI's project, right? These projects are kind of just demo projects, but pretend that this was like a PI project. You would now be able to see a lot of these graphs in real time, and this is like exactly what's going on at this instance. This project has 57 users, including 15 managers. No new users were added in the last month, and then total number of queries performed only in this project, right? Only in this PI's project, for example, like 2,600 queries. And then there's graphing capability, which kind of shows the number of queries by month, which is really neat. You can kind of use some of this thing to determine like which PI is doing the most activity in your I2B2. Top users. This is actually this is an interesting statistic. We use this at a internal project at MGB in the biobank portal, where you can actually just see like not in a nefarious way, but maybe what are some of the top power users? Some of these power users are doing 300 queries or something, in the past week. So you can actually change some of these parameters in the last day, in the last week. There's power users. There's users that don't do something. But of course, I guess if you look at this, you could also catch some users. Why are they running like 1,000 queries? And just inspect what's going on. So this really is for the first time a way to allow admins to finally inspect and see what is going on in your I2B2 in like a UI, in an easy way. You log in, and now you can see kind of the overall performance and status of your I2B2. And the one of the most more interesting views, so that's just the overview. So the second one is query, right? So this is the Qt query master table that I was talking about, where if you click on query, you can see all of the and these are for all projects, and you can actually select a specific project, but you can see all of the queries that have occurred in that I2B2 instance. So there's been almost 2,800 queries. By query name, you can sort all the typical things, but you can see runtime. So here, let's say I come in as an admin. If this was a real thing, this is sorted by start date, right? So this is basically the last few queries that were run. And if I come in as an admin and I just look at the, how's my I2B2 doing today? This doesn't look that great because the last 5 queries, error, 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 and then the fifth one is incomplete, right? So this doesn't look that great. So maybe I would take some action to just figure out, inspect, is it the same user? What type of query is this? And so forth, right? And then of course I can also zoom into a specific project just to see what is going on in that project also. Let me pause there. Does anyone have any questions so far about that besides Michelle? Sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes, yes. Sorry, Michelle's asking, is there an overall admin that can see all of the projects? So that's typically a user in I2B2 that has the admin role already. So that's the same person, that's the same user that would be able to like add a project and add parameters, add user parameters, but an admin role would be able to see all of the projects. Yes. Yep. So your question is, uh, typically they're pointing, most projects would point to the same CRC database, but could there be other projects that point to other databases, and like kind of how do you, can you see subsets of the data in that? So for example, we added the ability here um, so for example, in this query view, you can see that there's actually a lot of databases in here. This is actually not the typical um, setup that an I2B2 would that you would see, but you can do that. So like we would pretend that, like, let's say Cynthia 3 uh, was your really large database, and then maybe Cynthia 4 was like a view or something to like a smaller cohort, and Cynthia 5 was something else. We added this abilities just so you can get granular in that way. And some I2B2s somewhere do set up multiple CRC databases, large, small views, shifted dates, and so forth. So this is a way to access that granularity. Most people would see, like, let's say in an ACT site, you would see like the ACT database, typically. Yeah. Um, and then here, if you're already pointing to a specific database, you would see, in the proposal or in the slides, you would see like all of these could be just names of people, names of the PIs, for example. Right. Okay, so I won't repeat that, but for people online, Mike said something technical and Michelle responded with okay. And finally, there's a lot of features in here that I'm kind of just oversimplifying a lot of the features, but there's like include deleted queries, so you can actually see, you know, deleted queries in I2B2 means that somebody ran a bunch of queries and then in the previous queries bar they right clicked and hit deleted. But in I2B2, nothing's ever deleted, right? So we just set the status to D, it kind of disappears from the view. But here's kind of again the first time that you can actually just of a click of a button, you can see, what are the hidden queries or what's going on in I2B2. Oh, hey Griffin. Yes, yes.
Data elements, Michelle, that might be available to one group versus another based on their IRB protocols or other. Yeah.
Yeah, Griffin makes a great point. Right, there could be protected ontologies. That's what makes designing a dashboard, an activity usage monitoring dashboard, so complicated and difficult. And credit to the HFS team sitting over there and Jeff and Mike and others, because making a dashboard like this and also responding to like the kind of infinite ways that people use I2P2, right? Set up and then trying to learn how other sites design their I2P2, use views, use synonyms, depending on what database you use, is quite complicated. So this is kind of the most generic and granular way you can access a lot of this information. And it is available in 1.8.3. So again, once you do upgrade to 1.8.3 with the web client and the backend, you would be able to get everything. And so it's not like starting a fresh new query database or anything, right? You would be able to access you'd be able to see all your query history in existing I2V2 instances right now. I think that's it. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Oh, I'm up next.
So my question is, you showed a diagram that had 3 different projects connected to one CRC database and one ontology database. And I'm wondering, in the case where an institution has more than one CRC and a separate ontology database that goes with the second CRC, those are 2 separate projects. Is there anything in what you described about the admin dashboard or any part of I2B2 that becomes complicated when you have more than one CRC ontology in your I2B2 instance?
So that's a great question. I don't think it becomes complicated. I think that the dashboard is designed to account for that, right? So that was kind of the level of granularity we had to consider. So for example, like the Shrine and Act is like the perfect example. The Shrine and Enact, right? You would have like your Enact database that has your I2B2 ontology, and then let's say that you have a Shrine project with other Shrine, with your users that operate in the Shrine with maybe a slightly different ontology. This can actually inspect all of the, you can point it at the Shrine project and say, let me see all the queries and activity that's going on in that project, or let me see what's going on in my bigger thing. And typically in that Shrine stack, you would almost have no users, right? You would have like that one Shrine user that's running all the queries on behalf of Shrine, and then all your user activities in the Shrine. So It's not complicated, but it's like that is one of the common use cases that is actually addressed in this view.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So it's me again. Oh God. Okay, so I think this part of the talk is about real world execution. And I think I'm going to give a talk about how we use I2V2 in Recover, and then Griffin's going to talk about how at Beth Israel I2V2 is used and all of the great things happening there. Okay, so Recover, just for those who don't know, it's a very large, it is a very large nationwide, NIH funded initiative to study long COVID. Okay, so and then Recover stands for that, research in COVID to enhance recovery. At Mass General Brigham, we run the Data Resource Core, the DRC. So how we use I2B2 is that our job is to take all of the data that comes from long COVID participants and participants around the country, and all this kind of multimodal data, and harmonize that data in I2B2 using I2B2. So for example, on the top left, this is all the adult pediatrics autopsy survey data that comes in from REDCap, added with biospecimen data, EHR, digital health, Fitbit sensor data, and then recently multi-omics data. And we utilize I2B2 to basically, we put all of this data in I2B2, and then we prepare it for scheduled quarterly kind of data exports for Recover investigators. And so this is how we've been distributing data for the past many, many years now. So Recover has actually been following the latest and greatest I2B2 releases, and we have implemented I2B2 1.8.2 recently into Recover production. So when 1.8.3 does come out, we will install and leverage all of the great, admin dashboard things that I just showed. The way that Recover utilizes 1.8.2, and you've seen a lot of the talks, by Griffin and others, is we leverage the ease of UI styling changes in the web client. And it sounds like such a kind of minute point about just, okay, you change some CSS colors and logo and stuff, but this is something that is important and it's really easy to do in the new modern I2B2 web client, right? This is in before 1.8.0, it would be kind of repeating the work every time to change and style the I2B2 web client so that we could get it into kind of production ready for Recover. The login that we use for the Recover I2B2 instance, we exclusively use the SAML Okta implementation that is already built into I2B2. So we don't have username and passwords stored in our database or local username and passwords. It's all under two-factor authentication with Okta. We utilize the 1.8.2 wide file downloader that that Jeff and Mike presented about, with several data file templates that we create for Recover investigators. And then finally, I think the most important, or one of the most important things is security. And in the Recover environment, we have to operate under what's called FISMA moderate environment. So that's kind of a very secure, certified environment, and I2B2 meets that standard every time we do security runs and continuous monitoring and so forth. Here's just some screenshots. This is what our login looks like. So we have to say that you're accessing a U.S. government resource. but there is no local login user and password here. You click the button, sign into Okta, and it gets, your two-factor authentication processes, with the existing PM cell. So again, that's a feature that's built into I2B2 right now. We just reskinned the web client a little bit, so that just changing some of the bolder colors, as Griffin has shown before, adding the logo and so forth. And then we leverage, you've seen this is like creating the data table for exporting. We leverage the 1.8.2 way to allow Recover investigators to request aggregate files directly from our Recover. Now, the great thing about this, so this is the data request manager, right? So the great thing about the way that the aggregate file downloader works right now is that when somebody requests a file, right, they could add 50 columns wide file, right? This file doesn't land on their computer. So this file doesn't just get downloaded to their browser and then, we don't know what happened to the file. The file gets generated securely, on an I2B2 server, right? And then we actually, for Recover, we have a methodology that gets that transferred into a data enclave that Recover uses. So the file and data never leaves any of our FISMA monitor environment. And when it does leave our FISMA monitor environment, it actually gets transferred to another NIH FISMA monitor environment. So the I2B2 1.8.2 methodology for downloading files fits this paradigm perfectly. People just never get it into the browser and so forth. And finally, I wanted to show another live demo of a new data dictionary tool that Michelle Morris will like. Let's see. Tool. Mark this. Good, perfect. So this is, and let me try to zoom in, maybe I can. So this is a attempt at a modern ontology browser, which we're calling the data dictionary for Recover Investigator. So what we did here was we took, how I was mentioning the modern web client is so easily customizable, right? You can actually customize it by deleting stuff. And so we've deleted this looks like the I2B2 web client, but what we did was we deleted the ability to query anything. So there's no right pane with the query generator or anything, right? You can see at the bottom left we deleted previous queries. We've deleted the workplace, and so all that this is we've left the ontology tree on the left-hand side, right? And we've expanded the information that, the info tab in the web client. So what we did was we reorganized this web client, the modern web client, to build a data dictionary browser that allows Recover investigators to basically, before you're able to get access to the actual query tool to run any queries, you can learn about the data that we have in the Recover project, right? So, for example, you can click on and expand any of the folders just like you would in, as if you were running a query, but you can see that there's this new little icon, this little sparkly icon that signifies that there's a smart summary tied to this. And what this means in this context is that we are now including metadata about a concept, about a specific ontology concept term here, right in an I2B2 metadata table. So we're utilizing one of the columns. It's called C_comment. It's typically a field that is not really used in I2B2. And we are now generating these smart summaries and storing them over there in that table so that a prospective investigator can take a look at the data and learn more about what type of data is available in Recover. So essentially, it's just a ontology browser, read only. You can't run queries here. There's no patient counts. But with that methodology, it allows us to kind of open the ontology up more to the public, right? Without having investigators needing to sign up and be able to query and so forth. And for this instance so far, we've activated the smart summary only for where CH level is like 3 or something. So you can only go down to read the smart summaries for the first few levels. Okay, so a couple other things we did in this data dictionary tool is we've also included some helper things. It's a technical helper thing for existing Recover investigators. So as I was mentioning here, you can see it says 7 Bridges Recover Data Gateway. So this is kind of that secure data enclave that I was talking about, where the data goes. So imagine here that somebody uses the 1.8.2 data exporter, right, to generate their own files, or has already, sent the data securely to their data enclave. Using this ontology browser, this is only saying we're providing dynamic R and SAS code to be able to slice and dice that file further in the data enclave. That's all. So basically, it's just kind of helper code for a investigator to get started. This is very Recover specific, but all this is showing is that this data dictionary can provide, other information and be hosted inside an existing I2B2 metadata table without changing it, right? Which is, it's just metadata that can be added to your existing ontology. Anything else? Right. Right. So we got this up and running in very short order using, okay, so I think Sean's hinting at what is the methodology of generating these smart summaries quickly. So what we did was using Claude, I uploaded the I2B2 on this ontology, right? The few of the first few H levels. Also uploaded our README documentation that we give to investigators. Also uploaded kind of our helper guides about the Recover data, right? This is all kind of public information. And then asked Claude to generate these smart summaries in the exact I2B2 format that we needed. So to generate insert statements that we could use to insert these smart summaries directly into I2B2. So in really short order, and it took like a few hours, it was able to, Claude was able to read our README documentation, understand the I2B2 metadata format, and then generate these insert statements in here. And you can even see, like, when you read some of these smart summaries, it's the checks that we've done so far is that it's pretty good. So it talks about mobile health enrollment captures consent and enrollment via Care Evolution on the Recover mobile app. So this is straight from stuff that we've written somewhere, but Claude has helped us put this together. So this is really straightforward for standard coding systems. You could put it already knows ICD-10 and so forth, so you can actually generate a lot of these smart summaries nearly on the fly.
And so the great thing about working with ontologies is because it's not patient data, it's comfortable. We're comfortable to use some of these AI tools, right? And the documentation is obviously already on the web, right? It's already out. There's no fear of like, oh, it's going to go to the web. It's on the web. That's the whole point, right? And it's just involved in reorganizing it so that it's more consumable, right? So in your mind, though, you really have to make this very careful distinction between working on the ontology and allowing it to be assisted this way versus working with patient data. Even counts of patient data can be risky, I'm just going to say. So once you get into any patient data, you need to go to the other side and be like, whoa, what am I doing, right? But with essentially all kinds of stuff that's already, and ontologies are great to work with in this way, because in general, there's nothing private about, the ontology and the explanations behind the ontology and so forth. It's the real trouble is that the translation between all the documentation and what somebody's doing right then and there, right? And so large language models offer tremendous opportunity to take all that stuff that's out there, understand what it is, the little project that you're working on just at that time, what term are you interested in right now, and then kind of translating that into the information you need in kind of a summary, which, like Nich is insinuating, could even be done in a just-in-time fashion, right? So anyway, so that's why it really kind of, you can think of, it really accelerate a lot of things in ontologies that really don't have a match with accelerating in patient data because of the precautions you need to take.
Thanks, Sean. Hi.
Hi, great work. I'm Yuri Quintana from Beth Israel. A question about the ontology and version control. Over time, people will add more to the ontology, rename things, evolve it. What capabilities are there today, and how easy would it be to evolve the architecture so that you can track the history of changes, who made them, why they made them? And then I've worked in global health as well, and you then have to have translations, and you have to be careful about the translation because even in Spanish, there are different words in South America versus Spain for certain words that mean slightly different things. So I was part of the Recover initiative, and even in like the area for race and ethnicity, the list was put together quickly, and then for the analysis it was actually really hard because they actually had a single list for both race and ethnicity. And so the analysis became really hard when people checked more than one, and you wanted to analyze Hispanics, but if they checked 2 or 3, you didn't know whether to include them or exclude them and how to divide them up. So can you talk a bit about what issues, what the roadmap could look like for how we could evolve this to handle some of these issues?
This sounds like a Michelle Morris. That's a great question. Thank you so much. Sounds like a Michelle Morris problem. No, you're 100% correct. And we are a little luckier now because just like you've said, even the Recover ontology changes every release. It changes every quarter that we release it, right? Because the forums have continuously been changing. We got lucky here because the adult surveys is closed, so the ontology is a lot more stable nowadays. That's the exact issue we're trying to tackle in terms of how do we even, so let's say we generate thousands of smart summaries for, and we craft it the way we want it for a certain ontology. How do we even translate that to the next thing, or the next upgrade when you add more and more things into the ontology later on, and the next version of the ontology? What is the strategy of either copying over the smart summaries or whatnot into that new thing? Sean, do you know, isn't there like a versioned ontology thing that, like a ontology library thing that Michelle was working, like, no, okay.
Earlier question.
So we've come up with schemas for maintaining versions of ontology, which is kind of what I was alluding to early in the meeting at many times. Whether it's actually worth doing it or not, it seems like it's usually some kind of very isolated use case. So we talk about, oh, the NDC codes are changing all the time and they're reusing them. No, they use a very small handful of them actually. So the chance that, so you kind of got to pick your battles in a way, right? And think in terms of where you're going to put your effort and where the most pain actually exists. And so it's kind of a balance of things. So one could get into, a lot of very elaborate kinds of ways to version things and so forth. But I would say overall, it's not always that productive. I guess the comparison is there's some things that are just egregious that are happening. The most egregious thing that's happening is mappings from ICD-10 to ICD-9 codes. So if you look at those carefully, you'll see that many of the mappings are not actually similar. And so you'll have a mapping of something like a post-viral syndrome to, in an ICD-10 code, to brain fog, right, in ICD-9. And so if you just take that out of the book, and these are CMS mappings, you will get, hundreds of thousands of patients, right, from ICD codes, which are not intended to be post-viral syndrome in the current ICD-10 mapping, but they exist because it's mapped that way from ICD-9, which is, So I think that, in terms of the hierarchy of all the different things that are problematic and which ones one wants to attack, you kind of have to think of it that way.
Sean, you could actually use like a confidence value there, and that would be one of those, lower confidence scoring.
Say more, Bruce.
Open it up with the full description of each of those ICD-9 to 10 maps, not just the title. So then you use the more, verbose description of each of those, and then use a large language model to say, give me a confidence of how strong this association, and it will tell you that would be among the lowest confidence associations that there are.
So that's a really interesting. So here's the thing about confidences. So in general, our knowledge is done through graphs, right? So this is a acyclic directed graph. That is what the ontology is.
Yeah.
And so you need stuff that operates on that.
This would be the score of the
Yes, so you need some way to
This is the
incorporate
edge
it.
score.
So that's a really interesting idea.
That's the way neural networks work. We go and reweight the edge strengths.
But how would it be dynamic enough to affect the query result?
It's a one-time analysis of this, these graph associations, and then you're going to go ahead and give a confidence value to all the edges based on.
You
the
embed it
verbose.
in the acyclic graph, and then how does it affect the answer of?
It's a filterable element in your association output, so that value of somebody having this ICD thing is low.
But so ultimately, the way that all the queries work is that the acyclic graph goes and collects all the terms that are associated with that term that you dragged in, and there might be thousands of them, and there often are. Like if you choose cardiovascular disease, there's thousands of them. And then let's say you scored 500 of them with a lower probability, which
Only use ones that are confidence greater than 0.7. You just keep iterating up that and see what's the.
and that would be a choice in the query.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Okay, so I'm Bruce Arno from the Cincinnati Children's, and part of the reason why I'm here is I'm a PI of the Data Coordination Center for LungMap.net, and our mission is to now at this phase, having disease molecular omics deep data sets that are then usable for going into top med and going into recover and going, so that there's like everything that we have super high resolution capabilities for, including, just visual language model analysis of CAT scans, MRIs, segmented in 3Ds, use not just large language model, but, a foundation model, a VLM, and then, pull that back in for inferential reasoning to underline mechanisms that are there, not necessarily explicit variables in, structured data from clinical, but we get trajectory, and then we get like state 1, state 2 from, patient transitioning of a cough that doesn't clear to a CAT scan that shows organizing pneumonia that then with this magnitude of, 1, 2, 3 with the time point, that you decide on. So that's a clinical trajectory that would be really valuable to have abstracted out of the recover data. And then now we can use all of our kind of AI tools to look at a clinical trajectory, segment out a population in recover, and then say, make a hypothesis that here's an underlying molecular mechanism of that disease. Let's say it's, T-cell based autoimmunity, or let's say it's endothelial autoantibody, or, fill in the blank. And then, we also have some biopsies that are then analyzable using, a pathology like VerCal database, or, neural network model. So not just, so it's, connecting multiple analysis capabilities and inferential reasoning by biomarkers and, segmented things of population. So this is a very long description of what the kind of use case that I need from you to be able to serve out of recover. And so, and really this is kind of a patient-centered use case of an entire workflow that we would want this output for then, researchers to understand the clinical scenarios and trajectories, differential subgroups, and then do, make some cool hypotheses. What do you think? How does recover, how do you hear that request, and how does that work with recover?
Michelle? No, Sean's.
Right. I could definitely use some help here, but I will say.
Let's say Melissa could, how would she handle this?
So first, recover is several different projects, right? So there is an adult cohort where all the data is collected essentially by hand from the participants who answer surveys in a periodic fashion, just like the nurses' health study and so forth. And we do get some EHR data on them, and some Fitbit data, and some imaging data, and some electrocardiograms and so forth, but it's not super comprehensive. And then we have a pediatric cohort, and then we have an autopsy cohort. And then we have the EHR group, which is actually winding down, which did constitute the use of pCoordinate and N3C. And so
answering questions like, should we give Paxlovid now for somebody who has prior, they're above this age group and they had previous long COVID symptoms, should we give Paxlovid or not? We have no answer for that.
Well, so I mean, so those are the two different things we have available in Recover. This one is, I think, is the adult autopsy and pediatric, as you can kind of see, I'm reading it right off there, data, right? So that's those cohorts. We do not have, we are not, our DRC does not cover, so to speak, the EHR investigations that were done in pCoronet and N3C. So, and the fundamental difference is that in pCoronet and N3C, they didn't have a way to link back to the patient. So they couldn't really do what you're thinking, which is, oh, let's investigate these patients and see what's happening with them, right? In Recover cohorts, it is possible to do that. And I think that's actually like what they want us to do. But I will
What the
say,
patients want us to do.
yeah, it's, as we all know, COVID and long COVID is super complicated. And so, but there have been a few hundred studies, many kind of like what you're talking about, that have been looking at things. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I have two quick questions and one comment. Nich, this is great. Thank you very much for sharing this demo with us. I have a question about the, if you showed us a bunch of folders and the description of the folder. Is there, like, can you open up a leaf and will it show us, like, this is the data type for that leaf and these are the units for that kind of thing and that type of thing?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have any leaves that are only at the
Yeah.
0, 1, and 2 level. I don't
Missed
know.
thing.
But
Yeah. Yes, we do. So for some of the, like the labs that have units and stuff, I think it does appear. Um, in the recover data for survey data is not apparent, but I think the interesting thing here is because, for example, like all of this, all of these data elements under the adult folder, for example, is all like from REDCap, right? So any of these items, whether they're leaves or like, you know, let's say down the tree, we're actually showing, you know, other metadata in that same C comment field. So we've embedded REDCap data also. So here you can say that for this question, for example, right, this is coming from a specific form, like that's just random right now. But you can actually embed other types of metadata that you want to include into this kind of into this ontology browser that you want to kind of display and highlight over here. And then you would see like here now there's like a little pill here that says, okay, this is REDCap. So you can do that for labs and you know, you can capture units in here also. And maybe to your point, this looks like it's very recover centric right now, but we're working on a generic version so that we can release this data dictionary and it will apply to any I2B2 really, right? You point this at an I2B2 project, you set up certain read-only permissions for an ontology user, and then you would be able to see, you know, this type of data dictionary for any I2B2 ontology.
great, thank you. So my question number 2 is, how soon will we see this released for the rest of I2B2?
Soon.
Soon.
Okay, Michelle does keep asking. That's true.
Oh, that was Michelle's question then, not mine. So my comment is, and I came in a little bit late this morning. I don't know if this was already covered this morning, but my comment is, for those of you who did not go to the timeout market last night, you missed a good time, I have to say. Thank you.
Oh. What happens at timeout markets stays at timeout markets. Yes. Hi.
So one last comment. I think it would be useful if you could export the data dictionary and with every release for you to document, have an archive of that and there are a couple of reasons. Scientifically, sometimes if you add a new terminology term, you know, you want to know what date it was introduced because people say, well, how come we don't see this type of condition before 2016? Well, it's because the concept wasn't added till 2016. There are other implications apart from scientific. There are policy implications. For example, prior authorization and pre-existing condition. The definition changes depending, and that has policy implications for coverage. And so for both scientific publications, for archiving how the analysis was done, or for analysis for how policy changes have been made, decisions have been made, I think it's important to document what terminology was used.
That's a great suggestion. So a previous iteration of this ontology browser that was much older, built on older technology, we had that exact feature to basically right-click any of the ontologies and also just dump it to a CSV Excel file. And that applied to at any level. So you can actually just like, let's say you want participant surveys, you could right-click on it and then actually export that out. So I think that's a great point. We could definitely include that. Look into. Okay, thank you so much.